After years of suffering, she finally held her miracle. 5 tiny lives were growing inside her. Every morning she placed her hand on the still flat curve of her belly, whispered words of love, guarded it as the sweetest secret of her life. But that very week, her world collapsed. Her phone buzzed. A message she could not deny. The man she had trusted beyond all measure had betrayed her, and not with a stranger, with her dearest friend, the sister she once called family. The stab was so cold it stole her breath. Alone, carrying 5 children, abandoned, robbed of trust, stripped of the happiness that should have been hers. All she had left was one thing, the strength of a mother and a promise. I will never let my children grow up without love. What she did not yet know was that within those 5 tiny heartbeats, a hidden truth waited, a secret powerful enough to shatter everything. Have you ever felt your heart fall into such a dark abyss? If you have, leave a single dot, so she knows she is not alone. Evelyn carried her secret close to her heart. Every morning she whispered to the life inside her, already imagining the joy on Greg's face. She wanted the reveal to be perfect. In the drawer of her nightstand, hidden beneath folded scarves, she placed a tiny pair of baby shoes. Next to them, an envelope with the first ultrasound photo. She had ordered a cake, too, simple but special, with the words, "We are 3." She walked through the spare room of the house, running her hands along the empty walls, dreaming of soft colors, a crib, a rocking chair. She smiled at the thought of lullabies echoing in that space. But Greg was distant. His touch felt colder each day. His excuses multiplied. Late meetings, traffic jams, urgent clients. He came home with the smell of cologne that wasn't hers. Evelyn told herself he was tired, that men often struggled to process news like this. She clung to the hope that once he saw the shoes, the cake, the ultrasound, his heart would change. She kept rehearsing the moment in her mind, convinced love would heal the distance. She never imagined that her carefully planned surprise would collide with a truth far darker than she could bear. The storm rolled in on a Thursday afternoon. Rain lashed against the windows with relentless fury, as though the heavens themselves were mourning. Evelyn sat in the kitchen, her mind restless. She reached for her phone, craving the comfort of ordering Thai food to ease the ache of nausea. But Greg had left in a rush and forgotten his own phone on the counter. She hesitated. Just a glance, she told herself. Her hand brushed against the screen. A notification flashed, bright and undeniable. I can't keep lying to her anymore. We have to tell her the truth. The words blurred before her eyes. Her stomach twisted. Forcing her trembling hand to unlock the phone, she scrolled through the thread. Dozens of messages. Affectionate words. Secret meetings. Plans for a future where she didn't exist. The sender's name at the top of the screen hit harder than the rain against the glass. Melissa. Her best friend. Her confidant. The woman who had stood beside her through college, through her wedding, through every fragile moment of adulthood. Evelyn's chest heaved. The sound of the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm breaking inside her heart. Her vision swam as the phone slipped from her hands. It landed on the counter with a hollow thud. She staggered backward, gripping the table for balance. Then her eyes fell on the small box she had prepared. The baby shoes. White, soft, perfect. Symbols of her hope. Her knees buckled. The box tumbled to the floor. The shoes spilled out and lay scattered on the tiles. Their fragile silence screamed louder than any words could. Evelyn sank to her knees, clutching her stomach as if to shield the tiny life within from the cruelty outside. Tears soaked her cheeks. She whispered, voice broken and raw, "I will protect you. I promise. I will never let you feel abandoned." The storm outside roared, a mirror of the chaos inside her chest. The betrayal was unbearable, not only from Greg but from Melissa, a friend she had once trusted more than blood. The shoes lay there like broken dreams. Evelyn gathered them in her hands, pressing them to her heart as though the softness of the fabric could absorb the pain. But nothing softened the truth. Her world had shattered, and nothing could ever be the same. Days later, Evelyn found herself in the waiting room of the clinic. The walls smelled faintly of antiseptic. The floor gleamed under the harsh light. Around her sat couples, husbands and wives holding hands, whispering in low voices, sharing tender smiles. Their joy pressed against her like an unbearable weight. The chair beside her was empty. Its silence screamed louder than the chatter in the room. She folded her hands over her stomach, trying to draw strength from the faint life growing inside. When the nurse called her name, she rose slowly, carrying her loneliness like a second heartbeat. Inside the exam room, the doctor's questions were gentle, professional, steady. But Evelyn's answers caught in her throat. Family history, habits, expectations. All of it seemed meaningless compared to the truth she carried alone. When the gel touched her skin, the coldness shocked her body. The monitor flickered. For a moment, silence hung in the room. Evelyn's breath caught, panic clawing at her chest. She feared losing even this, her one reason to keep going. Then the faint rhythm appeared. The sound of tiny heartbeats filled the air. Not one, not two. The doctor leaned closer, eyes widening. Evelyn's world tilted again. The silence in the exam room stretched too long. Dr. Whitaker pressed the probe against Evelyn's skin, her brow furrowing, then shifting into disbelief. Evelyn's heart pounded. She braced for the worst, ready to hear words of loss. Instead, the doctor whispered, almost to herself, 5. Then louder, with a voice steady but astonished. 5 heartbeats. Evelyn, you are carrying quintuplets. The air seemed to vanish. Evelyn gripped the edge of the bed. 5? It was impossible. Unthinkable. She stared at the flickering screen where 5 tiny pulses danced, overlapping like a chorus of miracles. Her tears came fast, but not only from fear. Wonder mingled with terror. Against betrayal, against abandonment, against despair, her body had created not 1, but 5 fragile lives. Dr. Whitaker's voice cut through. It's rare, incredibly rare without fertility treatments, but there's no mistake. All 5 are here, and they will need you to be stronger than ever. Evelyn placed both hands over her stomach. The cold gel, the faint beeping, the sterile air faded. All she felt was the weight of 5 beating hearts inside her. She whispered through her tears, I will protect you, every single one of you. In the days that followed, Evelyn could have collapsed under the enormity of it. 5 babies, alone, no partner by her side. The whispers of betrayal still burned in her mind. But each time she pressed her hand against her belly, the fear was answered by determination. She filled notebooks with research, risks of multiple pregnancies, nutrition plans, hospital protocols. She read until her eyes blurred, driven by the conviction that knowledge was armor. At night, she mapped out her life with meticulous care. She restructured her budget, crossing out luxuries she no longer needed. She calculated the costs of diapers, formula, cribs, doctor visits. She clipped coupons, searched for secondhand baby gear, and joined online forums of mothers who had faced the impossible. There were moments she trembled, staring at the ceiling, asking herself if she could truly carry this burden. But then she whispered to the 5 small names she had given them in secret: faith, hope, courage, grace, and light. Each name became a promise. Each kick inside her body became a reminder. She was no longer living for herself. She was living for them, and, for the first time in weeks, strength overshadowed fear. Late one evening, Evelyn sat waiting in the dim living room. The ultrasound photo trembled in her hands. When Greg entered, loosening his tie, his expression froze at the sight of her. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice calm but heavy. She held out the picture. "With quintuplets. 5, Greg. They're real. They're here." He blinked, his face a mask of disbelief. 5? That can't be. That's impossible. "It's not impossible," Evelyn whispered. "They're ours." Greg's composure cracked into frustration. He rubbed his temples, pacing the room like a trapped man. Do you understand what this means? 5 children will ruin everything. Our plans, our life, my career. Evelyn's heart clenched at his words. She had hoped for shock, even fear, but never this cold rejection. They are not a ruin, she said, rising to her feet, hand instinctively covering her belly. They are life. Greg shook his head, his jaw tight. I can't do this. I'm not ready. Not for this. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the branches of the old oak scraped against the window, as though the world itself bore witness to the fracture forming between them. The next morning, Greg was gone. His side of the closet emptied. Drawers bare. The scent of his cologne lingered faintly in the air, mocking her with what had once been. In the kitchen, the reality hit harder. Their joint bank account had been drained. Only the legal minimum remained. Bills stacked on the counter like silent threats. Evelyn's hands shook as she opened the refrigerator. Half-empty shelves stared back at her. The apartment felt cavernous, every room echoing with absence. She wandered through the nursery she had begun to dream about, her fingers brushing the walls that would never see the colors she had chosen. Her knees gave out, and she sank to the floor, cradling her stomach. The words Greg had left behind haunted her. This will ruin everything. Her voice cracked as she whispered into the empty room. You are not a ruin. You are my reason. Alone, with 5 lives depending on her, Evelyn felt grief and rage collide. But beneath the pain, a small ember glowed. Even stripped of money, stripped of partnership, she still had something Greg could never take. She had the beating hearts inside her. The old minivan rattled as it carried her down the long highway. Boxes filled the back, holding what little Greg had left behind. In the rearview mirror, the city skyline shrank, replaced by endless stretches of Midwest fields. By the time she pulled into Springfield, Ohio, exhaustion wrapped around her body. But standing on the porch of her childhood home were her parents. Her father's eyes shone with quiet strength. Her mother reached out, gathering her into an embrace that needed no words. And then came Grandma Mabel, frail but firm, her presence filling the doorway. She took Evelyn's face in her wrinkled hands, her voice steady despite age. You are not alone, child. Not now. Not ever. The words broke the dam. Evelyn sobbed against her grandmother's shoulder, the burden momentarily lifted. For the first time since Greg's betrayal, she felt safe enough to breathe. That night, as she lay in her old bedroom, the cracks in the ceiling familiar from her youth, Evelyn whispered again to the lives inside her. We're home now. We will make it. Springfield did not promise ease, but it promised family. And that, Evelyn knew, was more than enough to begin again. Night in Springfield was quieter than the city. Evelyn lay in her childhood bed, staring at the cracks in the ceiling she had once counted as a girl. The house creaked with old wood, the sound of safety, of familiarity. Her hand rested gently on her swelling stomach. She closed her eyes and began to whisper, giving life to the names she had been carrying in secret. Faith, she said softly, stroking the spot where she felt the faintest flutter. You will be my anchor when I feel weak. Hope, she whispered, pressing her palm lower. You will remind me that even in despair, light can break through. Courage. Her voice caught, but she pushed on. You will help me face what others think I cannot. Grace. Her lips trembled. You will teach me to forgive, even when I don't want to. And you, Light? She whispered last, her tears soaking the pillow. You will shine in the darkest moments. Speaking their names gave her strength. The house was small, her resources limited, her future uncertain. But in that quiet room, Evelyn made a vow. No matter how hard the road, she would fight for each of them. By morning, whispers already circled through Springfield. Small towns carried news like wildfire, spreading fast and burning deep. Evelyn heard it at the grocery store as she loaded bread into her basket. She heard it at the pharmacy while waiting for her vitamins. Poor thing, voices murmured just loud enough. 5 babies, alone, no husband. Some words were coated with pity, others dripped with judgment. Evelyn kept her eyes forward, shoulders straight. But inside, each comment pierced her. At first, she went home and cried. Then she stopped listening. She bought a pair of cheap headphones and wore them everywhere. Gospel music, lullabies, even silence. Anything to drown out the sting of strangers' voices. Yet the stares still followed. Averted eyes. Pauses in conversations when she walked into a room. People who once greeted her warmly now offered tight smiles or turned away. The town didn't need to say it directly. Their looks said enough. She was broken, foolish, burdened. But every evening, when she lay in bed with her hand over her stomach, Evelyn reminded herself that the judgment of others would not define her children. They would grow in love, not in shame. Autumn arrived with crisp air and golden leaves. The annual county fair filled the town square with laughter, rides, and music. Evelyn hesitated at the entrance, clutching her jacket over her growing belly. She could feel the eyes before she saw them. Old classmates paraded their rings and smiling husbands. Mothers walked hand in hand with toddlers. And there she stood, pregnant with 5, alone. Whispers rose again, some polite, some sharp. Evelyn forced a smile and kept walking, her chest tightening with each step. Then a hand took hers, warm, firm, steady. Grandma Mabel. At 82, her back was bent, but her voice carried the strength of generations. She raised her chin high and led Evelyn through the crowd. "This is my granddaughter," she declared loudly. Heads turned. Silence fell. "She is carrying 5 miracles, 5 blessings that this world is lucky to receive." The murmurs died. The stares softened. Some turned away in shame. Evelyn's throat closed as tears pressed at her eyes. For the first time in months, she felt something break through the fog of shame. Pride. Not for herself, but for the lives inside her. Her grandmother's voice had given her dignity again. That night, the porch creaked under their chairs. The fair still echoed faintly in the distance. Evelyn sat beside Grandma Mabel, the cool autumn air brushing her face. "Do you know," Mabel began, her hands busy with a piece of embroidery, "that you are not the first woman in this family to face storms like this?" Evelyn turned, her tears still drying on her cheeks. "Your great-great-grandmother gave birth to twins in a cabin during the drought of 1950, while her husband searched for water miles away. Your great-grandmother raised 6 children after her husband died at 25, never begging, only working. Your Aunt Celeste, she fought cancer while raising her nephews, and she is still here today." Each story landed like a stone, heavy yet grounding. Evelyn's chest swelled with something she hadn't felt in weeks, belonging. The strength of her bloodline ran in her veins. She was not weak. She was not alone. "You are not the first to suffer," Mabel said, placing her wrinkled hand over Evelyn's. "And you won't be the last. But you have more strength than you know. Remember that." Evelyn nodded, her grip tightening. The words stitched courage into her bones. At 32 weeks, the pain began. Sharp, relentless, curling her body inward. Evelyn clutched her stomach, terror flooding her veins. Her parents rushed her into the car, the road to the hospital blurring under speeding tires. Her mother's pale face betrayed the fear she tried to hide. Her father's hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. Inside the hospital, monitors wrapped around Evelyn's belly. 5 heartbeats echoed through the room, uneven but strong. The doctor's voice was urgent. "Every day we keep them inside matters. Every hour gives their lungs a better chance." Evelyn lay tilted on the hospital bed, gravity pulling against her body. The ceiling tiles became her sky, the beeping monitors her lullaby. Each contraction was a wave she had to survive, her whispers to the babies her only anchor. "Hold on," she pleaded softly. "Just a little longer. Please, my loves." For 10 days, she lived suspended between hope and fear. Nurses came and went. Machines beeped. Time crawled. Every second stretched like eternity. Evelyn's body weakened, but her resolve only deepened. If her strength could buy them even a single hour more of life, then she would endure every drop of pain. The operating room was a blur of light and voices. Nurses moved quickly, doctors issued firm instructions, machines beeped in sharp rhythms. Evelyn lay still, her body numb from anesthesia, but her mind sharp with fear. The first cry pierced the silence, a tiny girl with the lungs stronger than anyone expected. Evelyn's tears slipped sideways onto the pillow. Then came two boys, nearly identical, each voice distinct but equally fierce. A second girl followed, small and delicate, but her cry cut through with surprising strength. Then came the last. A boy, slower to emerge, fragile in the doctor's arms. For a terrifying moment, silence stretched. Evelyn's heart seemed to stop. Then, faintly, a cry, weak but alive. 5 voices, 5 cries. Together, they filled the sterile room with a sound Evelyn would never forget. The sound of survival. Tears ran freely down her face as she whispered their names in her heart. Faith, hope, courage, grace, light. Against betrayal, against fear, against abandonment. 5 miracles had broken into the world. The last-born boy struggled more than the others. His chest rose and fell unevenly. Tubes connected his tiny body to machines that hummed and beeped. Evelyn reached out, but the incubator's glass separated them. The nurses named him Baby E. To Evelyn, he was Raphael. She whispered the name through the clear wall, claiming him with love that no barrier could break. Day after day, she sat beside him. She watched the monitors, counting every rise and fall of his chest, listening for every faint breath. Her fingers pressed against the glass as though her touch might reach him. "You don't have to hurry," she whispered. "I'll wait as long as it takes. Just keep fighting." At night, when the hospital was quiet and the other babies slept in her parents' arms, she stayed by his side. She sang softly, hymns, lullabies, even broken words when she could no longer find a melody. Each note was a plea, each word a promise. Though his body was small, though his breath was fragile, Raphael's spirit echoed hers. Stubborn, relentless, refusing to let go. Evelyn knew then. Love could bridge the space between life and loss. When the quintuplets finally came home, the little house in Springfield transformed overnight. 5 cribs lined the single-bedroom wall, packed so tightly Evelyn could barely walk between them. Bottles stacked on counters, diapers filled baskets. The air smelled of milk, wood, and sleepless nights. The living room became a nursery. The kitchen table disappeared under folded blankets. Every corner carried signs of survival. It wasn't luxury. The floor creaked, the paint chipped, and the old heater clanked in protest. But it was home. Evelyn stood in the doorway, exhausted but overcome by a strange peace. 5 tiny bodies shifted in their cribs. Their breaths came in sync, like a melody only she could hear. Her back ached. Her bank account was nearly empty. Her future felt uncertain, but as she looked around, her heart filled. The house might be small, the nights might be long, the challenges might be endless. Yet love pressed against every wall, stronger than the cracks, louder than the silence. This was not the life she had dreamed, but it was life, and it was theirs. Word spread quickly. At first, Evelyn braced herself for judgment. But something unexpected happened. The town began to show up. An elderly neighbor appeared one morning with a pot of stew. "So, you don't forget to eat," she said firmly. Teenagers from down the street stopped by to rock the babies so Evelyn could shower. Men from the hardware store brought a crib they had repaired with their own hands. Old women, with voices cracked from age, sang lullabies while holding a baby against their shoulders. They taught Evelyn old tricks for soothing colic, for easing fever, for calming restless nights. Day by day, the house filled not only with cries but with voices of support. Laughter mixed with fatigue. Kindness softened the edges of loneliness. "It takes a village," someone said. And Evelyn began to believe it. Because what felt impossible for one woman became manageable when many hands carried it together. The small home was still crowded, still poor, still filled with need. But it was no longer silent. It pulsed with life, not just from 5 children, but from an entire community rediscovering its heart. Just as Evelyn began to find her rhythm, a letter arrived. Court papers. Greg had filed for custody rights. He appeared at the first hearing in a tailored suit, Melissa at his side. His lawyers carried sleek briefcases, their voices sharp and polished. Evelyn walked in alone, wearing a dress borrowed from her cousin, her hands trembling around a worn folder. The arguments cut deep. They questioned her stability, her finances, her ability to care for 5 children. Greg's side painted him as the successful provider, the man of means. Evelyn was described as fragile, dependent, overwhelmed. Her chest burned as she listened. Each word was a strike at her worth as a mother, but when asked to speak, she stood tall, though her knees shook. "They are my children," she said firmly. "I have been with them every day of their lives. I don't have much, but I have love, and I have family. That is enough." The courtroom was heavy with silence. Against Greg's wealth and power, Evelyn looked impossibly small. But small did not mean weak. She had already survived betrayal, abandonment, and fear. She would not surrender now, not while 5 little hearts depended on her. The hearing ended in a blur of voices and paper. Evelyn stepped outside, her body trembling with exhaustion. On the courthouse steps, the rain had begun. Slow at first, then pouring hard. Through the downpour, she saw them. Greg, hand in hand with Melissa, their umbrellas shielding them from the storm. Their clothes were crisp, their smiles rehearsed, their eyes sliding past her as if she were invisible. The sight tore into her chest. She wrapped her arms around herself, but it did nothing to stop the shivering. She wanted to scream, to collapse, to let the rain wash her away. A car pulled up to the curb. Her father stepped out, no umbrella in sight. His jacket was already soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead. He didn't say a word. He simply opened the passenger door, waiting. Evelyn climbed in, her tears mixing with the rain. The silence between them was thick, but it was not empty. It was strong. Her father's hands gripped the wheel, steady, unshaken. For the first time all day, Evelyn let herself breathe. Love didn't always come with speeches. Sometimes it came in silence, in presence, in the steady strength of someone who refused to leave. Months later, the church bells rang softly as family and neighbors gathered. The baptism of the quintuplets had drawn the whole town, curious and supportive. Evelyn dressed each child in white, their tiny sleeves and collars brushed smooth by trembling hands. The ceremony was gentle, filled with prayers and hymns. Evelyn's heart swelled watching the babies pass lovingly from one pair of arms to another. They were no longer just hers. They belonged to a wider circle now. When she glanced toward the back pew, her breath caught. A man stood there, quiet, half hidden by the crowd. Nate, an old friend, once part of her youth, now returned. Their eyes met across the aisle. His gaze was steady, unspoken, carrying a weight she couldn't name. There was no smile, no words exchanged, only recognition. After the service, she found him outside. Leaning against the old church wall, his voice was soft when he greeted her, as though years hadn't passed. "You've done the impossible," he said simply, his eyes moving from her to the 5 children clustered around their grandmother. Evelyn's chest tightened. His presence felt like a door quietly opening. Not love, not yet, but something that might become a path forward. Life pressed forward. Evelyn needed more than determination. She needed income. One evening, sitting at her grandmother's table, the smell of baked honey cakes filled the air. "Why not sell them?" Mabel suggested, placing a steaming slice before her. "Your hands have always been blessed in the kitchen." The idea took root. A few weeks later, Evelyn opened a small shop in town, 5 Stars Bakery. The name honored her children, 5 little lights guiding her every step. The beginning was slow. She baked at night, balancing feedings and exhaustion. She sold by day, smiling at strangers, praying for sales. At first, only neighbors came, curious and kind. Then word spread. People whispered of the honey cake, the cinnamon rolls, the pies that tasted like childhood. Each dollar meant survival. Each compliment stitched hope into her weary heart. She hung a small sign by the register, baked with love for life itself. Standing in the warm, crowded shop, with the scent of sugar and cinnamon rising, Evelyn felt something shift. She was no longer just surviving. She was building. And, for the first time since the betrayal, she let herself believe in tomorrow. The quintuplets grew, their laughter filling the small home. 4 learned to crawl quickly, then to toddle across the floor with clumsy joy. But Raphael lagged behind. He was quieter, slower to move. His small hands trembled when he tried to grasp toys. His legs stiffened when she guided him to stand. Doctors reassured her at first. Some children just need more time, they said. But weeks turned into months, and Evelyn's fear deepened. Nights were spent searching for answers, eyes burning from medical articles, her heart twisting tighter with every uncertain word. One evening, after a difficult appointment, Nate walked her to the car. He had become a steady presence, helping with errands, fixing broken shelves, holding babies when her arms ached. He noticed her silence and asked nothing, but his presence carried weight. Raphael's eyes followed Nate as he lifted him gently, cradling him against his chest. Evelyn saw how her son relaxed, how his small fingers curled around Nate's shirt. The world outside judged her, measured her by money, by status. But in that quiet moment, she saw something that mattered more. Raphael was loved. Even in weakness, even in struggle, he was not alone. Evelyn lay awake one night, the children finally asleep, the house wrapped in silence. Her mind refused to rest. Memories pressed in, memories she had buried deep. That night years ago, the night when Greg canceled their anniversary dinner, the night she sat alone, fragile and broken. Nate had found her then, offering quiet comfort. Words turned into closeness. Loneliness turned into a moment she could not undo. She had locked it away, telling herself it meant nothing, telling herself Greg's betrayal was the greater sin. But now, watching Raphael, his slower steps, his quiet strength, the way his eyes mirrored Nate's, fear gnawed at her heart. Was it possible? Could Raphael be Nate's child? The thought hollowed her chest. She had carried the weight alone, never speaking it aloud. To reveal it might break the fragile peace she had built. To hide it was its own torment. Nate's kindness only deepened the ache. He never asked for more, but his steady presence whispered of truths she feared. Evelyn pressed her face into her pillow, tears slipping silently. The secret lived inside her, as relentless as her heartbeat. She loved all her children equally, but one question haunted her nights: whose son was Raphael? Years passed. The bakery grew, the children thrived, and Evelyn learned to smile again. One spring afternoon, she took the quintuplets, now full of energy and laughter, to Central Park. Nate walked beside her, steady as always, carrying a basket of snacks. The children scattered toward the playground, their voices carrying through the warm air. Evelyn sat on a bench, soaking in the moment. For once, peace felt real. Then she noticed him, a man standing under the shade of a tree, clothes expensive but worn, skin yellowed, frame thin and fragile. His eyes, haunted, hollow, were locked onto the children. Greg. Her breath caught. Years had aged him beyond recognition, the arrogance gone, replaced by something else. Regret. He began walking slowly, his gaze fixed on Raphael, who was drumming on a park bench with sticks, lost in his own rhythm. "It's them, isn't it?" Greg's voice was rough, a shadow of what it had once been. "They're beautiful, strong. I just needed to see them." The world around Evelyn blurred. She felt the old wounds reopening, the weight of secrets pressing harder than ever. She knew the moment she had feared for years had finally arrived. The children had gathered close, sensing the tension. Clara, always the boldest, clutched Evelyn's sleeve. "Who is that man, Mom?" she asked softly. Evelyn's heart pounded. She glanced at Greg, then at Nate, who stood quietly beside her. There would be no perfect place, no perfect time, only now. "This is Greg," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. He was part of our story." Her throat tightened. "There's something else you need to know, something I've carried for years." The children watched with wide eyes. Even Raphael stilled, his drumsticks slipping from his hands. "There's a possibility," Evelyn whispered, "that Raphael is not Greg's son. That night, so long ago." Her voice broke. "I don't know for certain." The silence that followed was suffocating. The children exchanged confused looks. Greg's face crumpled, the weight of his own failures heavy in his expression. Clara spoke again, her voice sharp but trembling. "So, who is his father?" The question sliced the air open. Evelyn's chest burned. The truth, once hidden, now stood between them all, fragile and raw. She could no longer protect them from it. She could only pray love would hold them together. 2 weeks later, they sat in the living room. The quintuplets had been sent on a play date, unaware of the storm about to break. On the table lay the envelope, unopened, heavy. Greg, frail and pale, leaned back against the chair. His breathing was shallow, his hands trembling. Nate sat quietly, his eyes fixed on Evelyn. She held the envelope but couldn't move. Finally, with shaking fingers, she tore it open. Her eyes scanned the words. Her breath hitched. "Raphael is Nate's son." The room went still. For a moment, no one breathed. Tears streamed down Nate's face, though he made no sound. Evelyn felt both relief and grief swirl through her chest. And Greg. Greg bowed his head, his voice breaking. "I knew," he whispered. "Some part of me always knew. And still, I threw everything away. My marriage, my family, my future, all for ambition, and now I have nothing." He covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. It wasn't the arrogance of the past. It was a man undone by regret, confessing to an emptiness no success had ever filled. Evelyn wept silently. One truth had been uncovered, but the question remained. What now? Greg's sobs faded into silence. His body seemed smaller, diminished by sickness and loss. Evelyn turned to Nate, afraid of what she might see in his eyes, but he only reached for Raphael, lifting the boy gently into his arms. Raphael leaned against him without hesitation, as if he had always known. "All 5 of them," Nate said firmly, his voice steady. "No matter what this paper says, they are my children. Every one of them." Evelyn's tears flowed freely. For years she had carried her fear like a shadow, convinced it would shatter everything. But here, in Nate's words, she found something stronger than fear. Raphael looked up, his small hand pressing against Nate's cheek. "Daddy," he said softly, the word falling into the room like a gift. Greg closed his eyes. A sad smile touched his lips. "Then he's richer than I ever was," he murmured, "because he has what I threw away." Evelyn's chest ached, but this time the ache came with warmth. She was not alone anymore. She had a family, not perfect, not simple, but chosen, built, and strong. For the first time she let herself believe. Love could truly heal what blood had broken. That night, under the quiet sky, Evelyn gathered her children close. The stars glimmered faintly above the city, their light soft but steady. She held Raphael in her arms while the others played nearby, their laughter rising like a fragile song of hope. Nate stood beside her, his hand warm in hers. She looked upward and whispered, her voice trembling yet clear. "A family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by love, by the choices we make every single day." Clara pressed against her side, her eyes wide. "Then, we're a real family?" Evelyn smiled through her tears. "The truest family I could ever wish for." In her heart, the ache of the past remained, but it had softened. What once felt like chains of betrayal now felt like threads woven into a stronger fabric. She had not only survived, she had built something new, something whole. Above them, the stars seemed to whisper back, each light shining alone yet forming constellations together, just like them. Do you believe love can create a family stronger than blood? Share your thoughts below. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that move the soul.